section, which is about evaluation, and we're gonna scooch through it pretty quickly. So what Riley is handing out right now is a rubric that I developed to test critical thinking skills for math. Can I actually have one of those so that I remember? There are two versions of this rubric. One is kind of the more comprehensive one where it has grading categories and what is addressed in each grading category. So if a student scores a 1 on this, that means they've hit these particular characteristics. If they score a 2, that means they've hit these particular characteristics. And then the other one that she's handing out is a simpler one, because you don't want to be dealing with all that paper when you're grading, where you can just kind of check a box. So we'll wait until everybody has one. I split math problems in here into the first step, kind of defining and analyzing the problems, and what critical thinking skills go into that. So for example, you'll see recall, you'll see expressing things better, you'll also see like understands the central aspects of the problem as opposed to just the superficial aspects. And then there's crafting a plan, so choosing between alternative plans to approach your solution. Solving the problem, making sure that they apply the concepts correctly. And then expressing and defining the solution, which may include a revision of their solution. In each section, I want to call out at the end of each section, there's a point that assesses their ability to ask appropriate questions for that section, because I am a big fan of question asking in my classes. And sometimes an assignment I will have is not to have a student solve a problem, but to bring questions about that problem. What do you want to know more about this problem? What connections do you think we can make? Ask good questions about this.
Would you leave important aspects of the problem out when you have them asking questions so they identify?
So that would be one way that I would do it, definitely. Another way, if we've been talking about different solutions, a student might come back with, what's the best way to approach this problem? Or if we're doing an activity that has a graph and the question only addresses one aspect of the graph, their questions might expand. Okay, so well I see that there's a food desert in this area of the city, or there's like 20 supermarkets per person in this area of the city. So they're asking critical questions about, well, what does that information mean? How far would somebody have to go to get to a supermarket if they live here? Why are there 20 supermarkets per person in this ward? So asking questions that extend and have them thinking critically about the numbers is another way to have them ask questions. So I'm not going to spend a super lot of time going over this because we are running short on time, and I want to respect the commitment that we made to you that we would be over at 1. But the packet that Riley just handed out has a couple worksheets that we thought would be helpful in expressing some of the measures for critical thinking that are found on the rubric. This first one, the first couple, are actually graphic organizers for students to explore their knowledge. The first one is a Freyer model, where they have a vocabulary word or a concept, and they're asked to explore it beyond just the definition. They go into the characteristics, examples, and what is not an example, and I love that part. What is not an example of a quadrilateral? What is not an example of following?
I feel like this is a really good warm-up at the end of a unit. Like if you've been doing volume for a week or something, and maybe like the warm-up on Friday, you give this to them blank, and they have to write their own definition and write their own. So it's a good way to see whether they actually understand what the concept means and what it doesn't mean.
So I had a question. So for non-examples, for this one, could you put could you use decimals or percents? That'd be fine.
Depending on what the topic is. So if your topic was fraction, and a non-example, it might be like a whole number. Okay. Then the next page is a 3-column worksheet. I stole this from the On-Course book series, which some of you might have heard of. It's a great book series for college preparation. And I forgot to put the citation, which is why I'm making sure that I mention this to you. It's not mine. In the leftmost column, the student would put the problem, say a division problem. In the middle column, they would actually write in words what steps they're taking. And then in the right column, they do the numerical solution. So if it's like 56 divided by 7, then the first step would be ask yourself how many times does 7 go into 56? And then they show it in numbers in the next column. And this is a really good way of making students slow down and making their thought process explicit. And also, it's a good tool after you've taught them how to do something. When they then check their work, they can go back and say, oh, well, I skipped this step. And I see it laid out very neatly here. And I know what that means. Because a lot of students, you're learning how to do long division. They write the problem down, and then they move on, and then they go back, and they see all these numbers, and they don't know what all those numbers mean. What's happening here? Help, right? So this is a good way, when they've solved out the problem, they also have an explanation beside it.
And good for students who are not naturally good at taking notes. This is like a good graphic organizer to help them organize their notes so that they can look back when they do their homework and see what they did.
So you'll notice, well, I don't use them for every
One
problem,
example
but
of a
yeah,
problem and that could go in their notes.
just kind of a model problem that they can then use to reference. The next page is how to write your own word problem. It's some guiding questions that we as teachers automatically think when we write a word problem, but a big theme in my class is teaching the students to become test makers instead of test takers. Think about how the questions are crafted. What's in the test maker's mind when they're making this question? They're thinking about, what is it you're looking for? So what do I have to give you in order to make it possible for you to look for that? How am I going to try to trick this person? Am I going to give them unnecessary information? And how am I going to present the information? So just some guiding questions for when I have my students write word problems. And then a word problem graphic organizer. Being able to organize their information is actually, it's a huge critical thinking skill. So having graphic organizers to help facilitate that is great. The next couple pages are about math journals. Do any of you do math journals in your classes? They're so cool. So math journals is just having students write about math. And this takes that 3-column organizer where they're writing their process a step further. On the next page you see some examples of writing prompts. You can ask students to explicate a question on concepts. What's the difference between an undefined slope and a zero slope? A process prompt where they talk about what the most important part of the process was, how important this part of the process is, what they do to study, how they created their plan. And then I really like the affective prompts, which are really about the emotions of math, because sometimes people just need to kind of debrief their feelings. Math brings up a whole lot of feelings. So particularly at the start of a term, I might do something like Riley did at the start of the class. What's your best and worst math memory? And that's a writing prompt. And it starts them thinking about how they've related with math and how they felt about math, but in a kind of a non-threatening way, because everybody's sharing their worst math memory. It's not exclusive to them. Everybody's had trouble with it. The next couple examples are some exit tickets at the end of the class. How do you prove that you've learned what you've learned? And they all, have a portion. Ticks that level 3 box, has them express or justify their answer. And then the last page is a reasonableness quiz. And what time is It is 1 o'clock exactly, so I was going to have you take the quiz, but I'm not going to because we're out of time. But this reasonableness quiz is the type of quiz that I give my students a lot, where I tell them, do not write down your work. Do not solve this problem. Guess what the answer is based on your number sense and what you know about this concept, and then justify it.